In my years working in Hollywood and working as a script doctor, I have read hundreds of fantasy manuscripts and screenplays. And the number one issue with setting isn't a lack of imagination as much as it's a lack of internal logic. Writers love to design the city of glass or the floating fortress because it makes for a really great cover image. But the moment the character actually step off the boat and walk into a tavern, the illusion completely collapses. If you want your audience to buy into your world, you have to understand that a location is not a static background as much as it's a living organism that is constantly fighting to survive. So today we are fixing your setting. We are ignoring the pretty maps and the aesthetic mood boards. Instead, we're using what I call the location logic loop. Function, constraints, culture, reputation, and emergent details. By the end of this video, you'll have the tools to build settings that feel truly unique and unforgettable. So where do we even start? Well, the very first question you have to ask, the one that acts as the bedrock for everything else, is this: why does this location even exist? And that might seem kind of obvious, but we're going down to the level of what is its primary function. This seems simple, but it's the step most writers accidentally skip. We can fall in love so easily with a cool image, a city in the clouds, a town carved into a canyon, without asking why anyone would go to the massive trouble of building it there. Without a core purpose, a location isn't anchored by anything. Its details feel random because they are random. Think of function as your location's reason for being. This purpose almost always falls into a few key categories. The most common one is economic. Is your city a trade hub at a crossroads or at the meeting of two rivers, like so many great cities in our own world? Or maybe it exists for resource extraction, a gritty mining town clinging to a mountainside rich in iron or some magical crystal. Then there's another function, the defensive function. Think of something like a fortress like Helm's Deep. It wasn't built for comfort, if that wasn't obvious. It was built to be this impregnable sanctuary, its entire design dictated by the need to survive a siege. Your location might be a garrison town on a hostile border, a watchtower overlooking a valley known for dragon migrations, or a location might also have a social or religious function. Is it a site of pilgrimage with an entire economy built to serve the faithful who travel for miles to visit a holy relic? Is it a university city like Old Town from A Song of Fire and Ice, whose main purpose is gathering and sharing knowledge? Maybe it was founded as a sanctuary for persecuted people or a resistance. And finally, don't forget the logistical function. A vast empire needs way stations for armies to resupply. A sci-fi universe needs space stations that are just glorified refueling depots on long-haul trade routes. Those places aren't always glamorous, but they're essential, and that essential nature shapes them completely. Once you have this core function, whatever that might be for your story, whatever it might be for your town, city, planet, anything, your world immediately starts feeling more logical. Logical to a point that the more creative and imaginative stuff can live on top of it. Defining the why is really the first giant leap away from the generic. So now that your location has purpose, it's time for the second question, which is arguably the most important for creating conflict and uniqueness. What limits or pressures does it face? So what are its constraints? No place exists in a vacuum. The real world is full of challenges, constant challenges. And it's in overcoming those challenges that true character is born. Because constraints are really the forces of nature, of scarcity, of outside threats that push against your location's function, forcing its people to adapt in really interesting ways. This is where your setting stops being a passive backdrop and starts becoming an active force in your story. First, you have environmental and geographical pressures. For example, a city in a frozen tundra, like Winterfell, is constantly battling the cold. This affects everything: its architecture, its food supply, and the very attitude of its people. Well, what if your city is instead in a scorching desert? Water would be more valuable than gold, and its existence would depend on maybe a single oasis out there. Think about other natural forces. Is the location prone to earthquakes, hurricanes, massive floods, or volcanic eruptions? Next, think about resource scarcity. What does your location desperately need but doesn't have? For example, a city on a rocky plateau might be incredibly defensible, but have no timber for building or for fuel. I mean, what would that city have to do? It would probably have to establish complex, vulnerable trade routes just to survive. This lack of a key resource is a fantastic engine for story and for making your locations feel specific. Think, what happens if that supply line gets cut? Finally, you have external threats. Your location's function might be mining a precious metal, but its main constraint could be that the mountain is also home to territorial dragons or a Balrog. A peaceful farming village might be right in the historic raiding path of these horse lords. The threat doesn't have to be monstrous, though. It could be a belligerent neighboring kingdom or even a rival trade city that established a faster route. So when you combine function with constraints, that's where the magic of your world starts to happen. You see, a trade city, function, that is constantly plagued by pirates, constraint, becomes a place of immense wealth, but also immense danger. Or a religious sanctuary, function, built on an unstable fault line, constraint, breeds a very different kind of faith than one maybe set up in a peaceful meadow. You see, these pressures force your world to become specific. They create problems, and in the solutions, we find our next crucial world-building layer. So how do people adapt to these conditions? How does the interplay of function and constraint shape their culture? This is really the next step that breathes life into a location. See, culture isn't just a random list of festivals and really interesting food. Culture is really the sum of thousands of adaptations. It's all the behaviors and traditions, the laws, technologies a society develops to thrive in a very specific set of circumstances. Culture, in a way, is survival strategy made real. So let's chain the questions together with an example. Imagine a city whose function is to harvest luminous crystals from this deep, pitch black cavern. All right, well, now let's think of the constraints. Well, its main constraint is maybe that the caverns are a maze of unstable tunnels, and the crystal dust is harmful to breathe long term. So what kind of culture emerges under those circumstances? Well, I mean, their architecture might favor small circular buildings that mimic the structural integrity of the tunnels. Maybe their most revered artisans wouldn't be painters in this setting, but mask makers who craft maybe intricate filtration masks that are both life-saving tools and a core part of their identity. Social status can be tied to one's tunnel sense and almost mystical ability to navigate the dark. Their laws maybe would have incredibly harsh punishments for anything that threatens the mines. So you see how that kind of works? The details aren't random as much as they're logical outcomes. The culture feels authentic because it's a direct response to the world it inhabits. So let's try another. A city whose function is being a major trade port. Its constraint is that it's in a region known for devastating, unpredictable tsunamis. So what do we think that culture would be like? I mean, maybe all the buildings are built on massive stilts with the ground floor open to let water pass through. The most respected guild might be the Wave Watchers, who maybe live in high towers and are really the masters of reading the sea and providing precious minutes of warning before a tsunami comes in. And then if we're talking about the mood of the town, the society might have a deeply sort of fatalistic but joyous worldview, a sort of live for today for the wave may come tomorrow kind of attitude. So now that you've seen those examples, this is how you get unique, memorable locations. It all starts to bleed into fashion and law, religion, social structure. All of it can be born from the collision of your location's purpose and its problems. Your people aren't now just living in some generic setting that we're just passing through town. They're really being shaped by it. And that's when you can get more specific into your story. All right, I just want to say a quick thank you for your support and watching. If you're finding this framework valuable for your own world building and want to keep improving your craft as a writer, this is a great time to hit that subscribe button. We explore all aspects of writing and storytelling like this, and by joining our community, you won't miss a single thing. All right, so we have a city with a purpose, facing challenges, and a culture adapted to all of that. But how does the rest of the world see this place? What's its reputation? Now, here's something interesting to think about. Every place has two identities. This can also probably apply to characters. The way it sees itself and the way the others see it. The truth of your location is in its function, constraints, and culture, but its reputation is the story, or more often the rumor, that travelers and rival nations tell about it. You see, the gap between the internal reality and the external reputation, that is a gold mine for plot and story. See, a reputation is usually a simplified, often exaggerated version of the truth. Outsiders won't know the complex cultural nuances you developed. They'll just sort of latch on to the most dramatic aspects. So let's go back to our examples. Our mining city, with its crystal wealth, the function, the dangerous tunnels, constraint, might have their reputation as the sort of glimmering grave. To the world, it's a place to get rich overnight, but where your chances of dying in the dark are just as high. This reputation attracts probably the most desperate and the most greedy of people. You see, merchants might trade with them, but at a distance, refusing to probably enter the city proper. They might be fearing that the dust-choked air and the mask-wearing locals are a little off-putting. What about our coastal city living under the constant threat of tsunamis? Well, its people probably see themselves as these resilient and clever survivors, but outsiders might see them as reckless fools living on borrowed time. You see, this reputation might mean few people actually want to settle there permanently, leading to maybe a sort of transient population. You see, reputation dictates how characters interact with your places before they even arrive. It creates expectations for your protagonist to either confirm or subvert. Does your hero arrive in a city known as a den of thieves, only to find an honorable community forced into crime to survive? Or is the reputation 100% accurate? So ask yourself, is your city known for its wealth, its danger, its strange customs, maybe its secrets? Is the reputation a source of pride or shame for the locals? Do they lean into it, or do they try to fight against it? The story your world tells about a place is just as important as the truth about your locations. All right, so we built our location from the inside out, establishing its core logic. Only now, at the very end, do we ask our fifth and final question. How do names, features, and geography flow from the answers we already have? And I know this is a big pain point of writers, trying to figure out the names and geography of things. But this is where you add the beautiful finishing touches, with one critical rule. These details must be emergent. They have to grow logically from the foundation you've laid. That's why I saved this one for last. So many writers make the mistake of starting with a cool name or a map and then trying to force culture into it. That's how you get places with generic names like the Shadowwood. That sounds cool, but it lacks depth. When details emerge from the story of your place or location, they carry real history and meaning. So let's start with names, something I know that can be so tedious and frustrating for writers. So the way I like to think about it is a name is a fossilized piece of history. Our mining city might be called Iron Vein. The coastal city could be named Port Vigil or Hope's Respite. If it was once completely destroyed and rebuilt, it might have a name more like Sorrow's Harbor. Now, I know those are sort of silly names, but I'm trying to help you connect names to history. See, the name really tells a story. So from there, let's think about specific features and landmarks. These aren't generic buildings as much as they're direct products of culture and its struggles. Our mining city might not have a generic tavern. It might have something more like the Gilded Cage, a pub maybe known for its reinforced ceilings and sad songs miners sing. Additionally, it might not have a normal town square. It might have a mask maker's circle, where the city's most vital artisans display their work. As for our coastal city, maybe their central landmark isn't just a statue of a king, but maybe it's more of a tidebreaker wall, this sort of massive seawall covered in the names of people lost to the waves. That way it becomes this sort of memorial, but also this defiant piece of engineering against the ocean. Finally, you can draw the geography and layout. Now this is the time to make your map, because the landscape is shaped by your answers, all of the things that we've had before. The mining city could be a dense cluster of buildings clinging to the most stable parts of the mountain. The tsunami-threatened port might be built in a sort of crescent, with wide, straight avenues leading away from the coast as sort of evacuation routes. You see, the geography serves the function, is defined by the constraints, and is organized by the culture. You see, when you save these details for last, they become evidence of the life and history of your world, waiting for your reader to discover them. So that's the framework. Instead of starting with a cool visual, you build your location layer by layer logically. First, function. Why does it exist? Second, constraints. What challenges does it face? Third, culture. How do people adapt? Fourth, reputation. How do others see it? And finally, emergent details. What names and landmarks result from this history? This 5-question framework gives you a systematic way to build a place with internal logic, where every element is connected and where you won't get any accusations of having generic locations. And once again, I'm Brian. This is Plotluck. And if you've ever loved a story, felt let down by one, or dreamed of telling your own, pull up a chair, hit subscribe, and let's stir the plot together. That's a wrap.